Okay. Hi, I'm Gary Godden, Police and Crime Commissioner for Nottinghamshire. Welcome to my new format of holding the Chief to account. I just want to introduce you, of course, to the new Chief Constable for Nottinghamshire, Steve Cooper, who has been authorised by my board to be the new Chief for Nottinghamshire. So I'm delighted to welcome Steve to this new format of podcast accountability. Obviously, I set the police and crime plan for Nottinghamshire, and I'll be asking the Chief some questions around the police and crime plan, around policing in Nottinghamshire, and hopefully some topical issues that are currently facing our communities. So really, without further ado, Steve, how do you feel that Nottinghamshire is progressing in achieving some of the objectives that I've set in my police and crime plan, and putting our communities and victims first?
Okay, thank you, and thank you for this opportunity to be part of this podcast. In terms of the police and crime plan, I think the victim being at the centre of everything we do is absolutely key. So, as you'll know from some of the work we've done on Catalyst, we now measure our victim contact, our victim care, and satisfaction rates. So in terms of keeping our victims updated, we're consistently achieving that within the 28-day timeframe, or sooner if that's what the victim wants, within about 95% of cases. Mm-hmm. So we are really making sure that all of our officers, all of our staff and our supervisors know that that's important to us. Mm-hmm. In terms of tackling violence against women and girls, we're rolling out Soteria, which is our sort of way of dealing with sexual offences across the force. That's going extremely well. We're getting a lot of our officers trained. We now have more specially trained officers to deploy to those calls in the first instance. So again, that is about making sure that we get the right resource into the right place at the right time. So some really promising, good work there, but clearly still more to do in terms of some of our positive outcome rates in those areas. In tackling serious violence, again, we've seen some sort of tragic cases recently on our streets, but we are being very good at bringing offenders to justice. So our charge rate for our most serious violence is positive compared to sort of national and regional averages. But we actually, again, make sure that we tackle those people who are causing us most harm in our communities.
What was interesting in some of the serious violence offences that we've had is that a lot of the communities were very pleased in the police response to the incidents that happened. And obviously that helps with the trust and confidence of our communities. In terms of our resource and what we're putting into neighbourhood policing, how would you describe that in terms of its development and how it's embedding into our local communities?
Okay. I think it's embedding very well. We're not complacent. We know there's still more to do in improving our neighbourhood offer. But what we have now across the county and city of Nottinghamshire is 7-day coverage with all of our neighbourhood teams across every area of the city and county. That goes from roughly 7 a.m. till at least 11 p.m. at night, often into the early hours if that's where the problems persist, which is a new offer. Before, you'd have days where they wouldn't be working in a particular area of the city or a particular area of the county. So people should now have a named, identifiable, recognisable officer and PCSO in their neighbourhood who are there available. If they're off duty, which obviously they will be at times, they have one of their buddies or one of their neighbourhood officers and staff who can deploy into that area to deal with their local issues. So much better. We're doing the neighbourhood guarantee that obviously is part of the government's initiative. We're fully compliant with that. We've got our updates going back on a suitable time. We know what the priorities are for our every neighbourhood area. They're published on our website, and we'll do a You Said We Did every 3 months to keep people updated as to how we're tackling the issues that they've told us are important. If people wish to feed in and update those, they can to the neighbourhood survey or through their local councils.
Fantastic. One of the things I must really praise the force in is the neighbourhood offer. But I'm doing neighbourhood socials, come and have a coffee and a chat with the Police and Crime Commissioner. And one of the things that is actually striking me on the areas that we've looked at so far is the relationship that the local inspector seems to have with the community. That is really embedding really well, and I think it's starting to deliver really positive outcomes for the local community. Having that point of contact, understanding that somebody is concerned about the community and is acting in the best interest of the community is really popular, and the communities are feeding back to me, saying to me, we're really pleased with the offer we've got. It's not perfect, but it is. There are some big strides being made in certain areas where they are absolutely delighted with the response of the police. So it is going well.
No, good. Thank you.
One of the issues that we have at the moment, obviously, very difficult climate, and we have obviously hate crime. So I think it's important that we touch on this and talk about hate crime and community cohesion. And clearly one of the topical issues at the moment is nationally anti-Semitic crime. Hate crime has risen, which is a concern. What work is taking place locally with our Jewish communities?
Okay, well, we have independent advisory group which have been long-standing across the city and the county, where we can hear voices of representatives of communities about what are causing concerns, what's going well, but also, more importantly, where there's concerns and where there's sort of anxiety. We convened our independent advisory group after the recent attacks in London, where the threat level went up, and we've actually spoken around where are the issues, what are the concerns, how can we improve reporting, and how can we improve confidence. Hate crime is a horrendous act, and is absolutely targeting people when they're usually at their most vulnerable and sort of actually, identifying their features. So what we do, we have deployed preventative patrols around key areas. We've done proactive patrols around key areas and reassurance patrols. So they are very different. Some of them are around protective security, some of them around actually just having a neighbourhood officer there to speak to and share concerns with. We've also looked in feeding into the regional and national pictures around any protests that are coming up, because we know that they can trigger both sort of anti-Semitic views, but they can also trigger other crimes of hate, whilst obviously managing people's right to protest in a peaceful manner. So we work with our sort of local and national teams in relation to those matters, but most importantly we listen to the voices of our communities. So we look at where hate incidents are being reported, we look at where hate crimes are being reported, and we make sure that they're prioritised. We're also working with our CPS locally and regionally, where they have agreed that they will prioritise hate crime case files above some other case files at the minute. So people should see that where we get reports, where we get somebody in custody, that person should be able to process with the criminal justice system faster than it would have been even only sort of a month ago.
Can you also explain a little bit why it's so important to report any crime of hate, even kind of if it doesn't really meet the threshold of crime?
Okay, of course. I mean, hate crimes are crimes that people know traditionally as crimes, so whether it's criminal damage or assault that are aggravated by hate. Hate incidents are where they don't reach that threshold, which some people feel reluctant to report. We still do take reports of non-crime hate incidents. They're not recorded on our crime system, but they're recorded on our command and control system and flagged. That allows us to create what I'd call a bit of a heat map. So to actually understand where tensions are building, where tensions are rising, or where we're getting somebody who's been a repeat victim of antisocial behaviour, for example, but not a victim of crime yet. Because we can still step in, we can still intervene, we can still try and work with them to try and safeguard them, but also to try and work out, what is it that's causing these underlying issues, so we can respond appropriately. Because without understanding that full picture, it's really hard to know where we should deploy our resources at the right time. But also it's really hard to know where we've got people who could be seeking help. Even if it's not from the police, we can point them to a partnership or a charity for that support.
Fantastic, thank you for that. I do have a public question, and this is from Jemmy, and it's regarding accessibility matters, Nottingham CIC. Disability hate crimes are often underreported because victims face barriers proving harassment and must carry the burden of showing hostility. What is Nottinghamshire Police doing to make reporting fully accessible, supporting victims throughout the process, and ensuring that they get the justice they deserve?
Okay, thank you. I mean, that's a very wide question, so I'll try and take it bit by bit. In terms of disability hate crime, we know it is significantly underreported. There's many studies that show that only a very small fraction of what we know to be taking place in society is reported, and a variety of reasons for that. What we're trying to do to encourage it, we have, for example, within our disability awareness network within the force, we have specialist training that goes on to our officers and staff. We have people in the control room who are trained to deal with what is sort of disability hate crime and try and recognise the signs of it. But we've also had matters where we're going out to our local communities to try and encourage reporting in areas where we've seen, as I've said before, that heat map starting to generate. Once people get in touch with Nottingham Police, and depending on what their disability is, because sometimes people will look at sort of disability in a whole range of spectrums, we will put in special measures for those individuals. So for example, somebody is a member of the deaf community, well, we can actually do automatic sign language, because we've got a contract with somebody that they can literally, on the street or in the control room, do that sign language with through an interpreter and obviously get through to us that way. If we have people that have got vulnerability when they're phoning us about other matters of disability, we can assure that an appropriately trained officer is sent to their home address, or we can do other sort of video recordings with them through another system we have in the control room. So accessibility is much better than it has been in the past. In terms of that confidence to report, which is probably the next thing that we have to get over, we're doing lots of sort of work with our charities in the area, doing lots of work with the third sector to try and get that confidence to report matters to the police, certainly where there's been a crime committed, because we will investigate it and we will make sure that the offenders are brought to justice. When we then get into the criminal justice system, which they were such a sort of a wide question, there are a number of special measures we can put in place if they are needed. So if, for example, if they're blind or deaf, we can obviously make sure that they're suitably supported within the court process through interpreters or sign language or other mediums that they can communicate with, and the courts are aware of that process. If they're feeling particularly vulnerable, there are other special measures we can put in place, such as the screenings or anything else to make them so they're actually giving evidence in a safe and secure manner that is suitable and appropriate with their disability. And that's to make sure that they do feel safe to go into that court process. But overall, we're trying to increase our reporting of disability hate crime. When it is reported to us, we're treating it extremely seriously. And then when it goes towards the court system, if it goes towards the court system, we'll make sure that the support is there through our victim support, but also through liaising with the courts and the CPS to make sure that special measures are considered.
Okay, that's a very comprehensive answer to what is quite a deep question with lots of parameters around it. I've got another public question from Jim Simpson from Carlton.
My name is Jim Simpson and I live in Conway in Carlton. My question to you is, do the police treat everybody equally, no matter what their ethnic background is?
I would like to say yes. I would certainly like to say I hope so. But I think it would be wrong at this time when we've had evidence around disproportionality in whether it's stop and search, use of force, or even criminal justice outcomes, to not recognise that we have certain ethnic groups who are disproportionately affected by police action. So I'm not blind to that in one way at all. We are training our staff, we are coaching our staff, and we have lots of different plans, which I'll come on to in a moment, in relation to how we make that better and how we improve it. And I would like to say that the vast majority of the officers and staff in Nottinghamshire Police treat people professionally, courteously, safely and with respect. But in terms of areas where we know we need to improve in some of that disproportionality, we have Black History training, which takes place where every member of our staff goes through Black History training. That's a half-a-day course that goes into some of the sort of backgrounds, the underlying issues, and just raises people awareness. We have, through our Leadership Academy, how we want our staff to act and train, and how our values, which again is about treating people with courtesy, fairness and respect, that takes place throughout. And we also have scrutineers that come in from outside in the communities to make sure that they actually look at areas where I know that people have lack of trust and confidence. So we have an independent scrutiny panel that reviews at their discretion and at their choice use of force, body-worn video, stop and search, body-worn video. We have people who go into our custody suites to check how people are being trained. And that's all around making sure that where people have got lack of trust and confidence, we can either be shown that we are doing things correctly, proportionately, legally and ethically right, or where we haven't, we can learn from it and it can be pointed out to us and identified. And we're always looking to improve our cycle. In addition to all of that, we're still signed up to and working really hard on the Police Race Action Plan. So I think all of those areas show that we're on that journey where we're looking to improve. I think we are in a much better place than we have been in the past. And it's certainly, but I'm not complacent to say that we're in a perfect place. But so the staff and officers who work for me, who work for Nottinghamshire Police, are really, really good, really professional, and obviously, they do their absolute best for the victims out there.
Hello, my name's Louise. I live in Carlton. This question is for the Chief Constable. How do the police protect people with neurodiversity from hate crime? And
that's from Louise from Carlton.
Okay, I've actually just stepped out from chairing our Police Internal Neurodiversity Working Group. Neurodiversity is a really wide spectrum of areas, but what we make sure now is that all of our officers and staff who go through initial training or go through supervisory training have inputs on what neurodiversity is. It has been previously sort of misunderstood. It's been around forever, but it's really been recognised more now than ever has been. So we're giving our staff training. And so, for example, we make sure that our staff are aware of autism or ADHD and how that can affect people's behaviours. They're also aware that when people are, say, taken into custody, for example, that can actually cause huge amounts of anxiety for people who suffer from neurodiversity conditions. We make sure that our staff in that custody provision are suitably trained. Likewise, when they're a victim or a witness, we make sure that if they need some special measures or special considerations taking place, that we facilitate that as well. But that awareness that our staff have now compared to what they had before, and I think that's the case across the country, is significantly better. Hopefully people will see the difference. We've had sort of academic research conducted in how we deal with neurodiversity within the workplace and outside of it, and we've got some really good promising practice.
Fantastic, thank you. So just closing on that area now, we're going to move over to another I suppose topical subject, which is out of court resolutions. Now this is quite strong in Nottinghamshire, and with the government wanting to move away from putting lots of people in prisons and having different sort of strings to their bow in terms of reparations for their crime. This is, for me, one of the most powerful areas that I think, in terms of a service and a result of that service, that we have to offer. So out-of-court resolutions, I think, is really powerful and really steps into alleviating a lot of the pressures that the criminal justice system is experiencing. And we've seen a lot of developments over the years in terms of out-of-court resolutions. In your mind's eye, what do you think has changed?
I think out-of-court resolutions, when I first started, were seen as sometimes as a bit of an easy way out, if I call it that. And I think that the whole view of policing, the whole view of the criminal justice system has now fundamentally changed. I think the diversionary aspects out of court resolutions allow quickly are much better than sometimes putting people through the whole criminal justice process. So, for example, if we've got somebody who has committed, let's say, minor criminal damage, the thought of putting them before a court in 6 months or a year's time to receive a fine or a discharge doesn't actually deal with the core issues of the harm they've caused the community. With some of our conditional cautions or some of our other out-of-court disposals, we've seen really good examples of where people who have caused significant antisocial behaviour, criminal damage, like actually going out to the communities and making sort of reparations, so cleaning up the streets, actually cleaning up some of the graffiti that's been taking place. And that shows a really good way to the communities that we're taking action, but also to the person who's committed that offence, actually there are consequences and this is what can happen. The reoffending rate for people who go through the out-of-court resolution route is significantly better than if we put them through the normal criminal justice system. So I think, I know people don't like statistics, but it's over 70% people don't go on and reoffend, which I think is a really promising picture because we don't want to put people through a criminal justice system unless they need to, and I'm sure that people don't want to go through the criminal justice system unless they need to. And likewise, the criminal justice system is already crowded, and so if we can divert people away from it and stop them reoffending, that's even better. So it's definitely not a soft way out. It is definitely something that seems to work in the communities, and where people have seen it in their communities, they really value it and really like it. So I think it's a really good new initiative, and we're sort of it's very regulated, very tightly controlled, so it's not that anyone can be subject to it. It's only those appropriate cases, but it does work in those cases.
Just recently, I've just been into the city centre where Immediate Justice, which I fund from the OPCC, is obviously doing the out-of-court resolution programme. And I spoke to two individuals there. One was there for drunk and disorderly, two young men it was, and the other one was there for a small possession of cannabis. Prior to this, I've also spoken to, when we were running the scheme before, a young woman as well whose dog had bit somebody and they were coming to do their reparations. And having spoken to them and getting their understanding of how are they feeling about this, they actually were very, very keen on doing it getting it done and being out of the criminal justice system. So I think from many angles, it seems to me like very much a win-win-win, not just from the community who are seeing individuals putting back into the community, but also the individuals that are doing it, seeing the benefits of, I'm not in a long process. So I think it's very much a win-win-win, and we will continue to fund that. And but no, really good. So another topical issue that we have coming to us at the moment is our rural communities and how they feel about the policing offer that Nottinghamshire gives. Now, when I talk to our rural communities, I know that the offer that we give in Nottinghamshire is far better than a lot of the offers that are on the table from a lot of other forces. And I just really wanted to sort of ask you, because the NFU, who are the National Farmers Union, have done a bit of a survey around some of the neighbouring forces around our offer, and I think that when I read some of the outputs that they put into the community, I don't actually think it's very accurate on what Nottinghamshire is offering, because I believe that our offer is a really strong offer. And when I talk to lots of other forces and lots of other police and crime commissioners, and I talk about the offer that we put on the table, they are shocked and stunned at what is available to our officers to deal with rural crime. But also, one of the things that I want to touch upon is rural crime isn't just about the farmland and farmers. It's about our rural communities and some of the issues that we have within those communities, whether that be domestic violence, whether that be burglaries of our rural communities, is equally as important as the problems that some of the farmers have. So could you just talk to us a little bit around our rural crime offer and how you see that panning out?
Yeah, I can. I'll try and give some of the rationale as well as to why we've chosen this model rather than a sort of another one. So we don't have a dedicated team or sort of small number of officers who we deploy into rural crime in Nottinghamshire. We have a much larger than the national average, so almost twice the national average number of neighbourhood officers that we deploy across the force. A significant number of those are in our rural communities. So not just in areas of farmland, like you say, but in our rural communities. You know, you've probably got a sort of about 40 officers who are trained, equipped with specialist knowledge to deal with rural crime as well as wildlife crime, and the two are obviously distinctly different. They work the shift pattern that I've previously described around the sort of between about 7 a.m. and well through to sort of 11, if not longer, at some of the weekend times, and deploy in those areas with their specialist skills to deal with all the crimes that are in front of them and try and prevent and deter them. We've chosen that model to actually give us greater coverage across areas, because when we've considered before, do we have a team of, let's say, 1 sergeant, 5 constables to deploy? If you look at the geographical landscape of Nottinghamshire, we would be simply scratching the surface and, being a bit of whack-a-mole and putting them down in the south of the county, then really far up in the north. And I don't think that would actually work. But by having dedicated neighbourhood officers around every single one of those rural beats, who members of the farming community, in this case of the NFU, or members of the rural community, can identify, email, telephone, see in their local communities to defer their issues, they can then make a bid into our tasking process for a whole number of specialist capabilities that we have that can deploy. So we have now the off-road bike team who can deploy to deal with matters of sort of either off-road biking in their areas or other areas where our normal vehicles can't go. You funded another all-terrain vehicle that we can deploy, so we've got a number of all-terrain vehicles that can go literally anywhere across the areas, that can focus on areas which previously, if you just had a specialist team and that was being moved around, wouldn't have that sort of greatest capability. And we've also got our police drone, as well as some of the other more innovative drones that you're looking at funding to actually target specific areas in those areas. That tasking and that bringing in specialist resource over and above what we normally have allows us to give a much wider offer, I think, to some of our communities. I mean, we would always love to do more, and I think everyone would always love to do more for every member of the public. And if anyone's got any real concerns, I really suggest that they speak to their neighbourhood policing team, they speak to their local policing inspector about what those concerns are, and we'll try and work with them to address them.
So thank you for that, Steve. It's a real interesting insight into our rural offer, and I think what I would stress to our rural community is that the offer that we put on the table really relies on them reporting, so that we can really analyse what the actual challenges are and how we apply our resources to that. There are resources there are resources available, but it really is down to please make sure that you report so that we can build that richer picture.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, and thank you for that reassurance. One of the other sort of issues that has been happening in Newark just recently is that they've had the Knife Angel has been in Newark over the last several weeks. And it has seen lots of different visitors, and it leaves our shores, I'm led to believe, on this Sunday coming. Of course, this is a powerful piece of work, artwork, and obviously it's made up of lots of seized knives and blades, and I suppose in many ways draws a lot of attention to the issue of knife crime in our communities. And I know this is one of the challenges that not just Nottinghamshire has, but a lot of other police forces have within our communities. And it's obviously located at the Newark Town Hall, so it is of prominent interest. What's your thoughts on the Knife Angel and some of the issues around knife crime that we have in Nottinghamshire?
I think what the Knife Angel does really well is get a conversation going. Knife crime, regardless of how much reassurance we give people around, actually it's going down. Mm-hmm. We're recovering, when we do a stop and searches, we recover weapons and we put people before the court or other methods to actually sort of try and prevent it. You know, knife crime is so impactful because, you know, somebody who produces a knife and stabs somebody, there are so many ways that somebody can get seriously injured and killed, as we've recently seen in Newark with the sentencing that we've had recently. You know, it is a truly tragic consequences. So to have that conversation started, so mums, dads, aunties, uncles, granddads can start having a talk, because it is usually younger people who are carrying these weapons, so can have that conversation and start to actually make it that sort of daily topic, maybe not quite daily, but around the consequences of carrying a knife are really significant, both for the victims but also for the offender, who often, you know, obviously receive serious injuries themselves. In terms of what I think Nottinghamshire Police can do and do towards knife crime, so we have a dedicated knife crime team in our force. They get deployed to where our hotspots are identified. They have a fantastic return rate in terms of both stop and search, but also some of the other activities that they lead on, such as test purchasing of the purchase of knives by young people in certain shops, where they then report people onto trading standards. But we also have some great work with our sort of third sector and charity providers. So Stop the Bleed, which has gone out there and actually trained thousands of people on how to deal with sort of emergency first aid, which isn't just about knife crime, but that's the primarily areas, as well as putting tourniquet kits in. That's obviously for when it's too late, if I call it that. But what, again, that does do is have that thought around the consequences of people carrying these weapons and dealing with it in this way. So I think the deterrent, the education that goes with that, provided by both the police and our partners in sort of Stop the Bleed, for example, is absolutely fantastic as a way of sort of deterring people. I want to try and reassure people that knife crime is still extremely rare. Knife possession is still, you know, low, but just the consequences, and obviously by that for the reporting, does create that fear. So if people do know people who are carrying weapons, carrying knives, they can either, you know, please report it to us. If they don't want to report it to the police, report it to Crime Stoppers. We do use that intelligence. We then go out and do targeted activities, and we can look to try and prevent it, because the more knives we get off the street, the better. And I think what the Knife Angel does is allow us to have that conversation with people in areas where sometimes, you know, people don't like having that conversation, but we do need to get those knives off the street and stop people being victims of serious violence.
Thank you for that, and thank you for that reassurance. That closes my podcast with the Chief. Hopefully there have been, you've had an insight into some of the policing that takes place in Nottinghamshire, and just thank Steve Cooper for his open and honest input into some of the subject matters that obviously we deal with. And just finally to say that I just want to highlight that my next public safety social is in Ashfield and will take place in Kirkby on Thursday the 21st of this month. People can visit our social media channels to learn more and book a space. These have been very popular and a great way for myself and local authorities and neighbourhood policing inspectors to really engage and get a grip of some of the local issues that are happening in our local communities. And I think the last one that I did was in